Welcome to the new media show. We're back.
Doing the new media show again.
People are actually going to listen to this junk.
We do it live?
We're live right now.
We'll just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live.
We just can't get enough. The new media show.
Let's go.
Just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live. Bada bing, bada boom.
The new media show. We do it live.
Just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live. We're going live.
The new media show. I'm like Adam Curry and you're more like John C. Dvorak.
I think I am Adam Curry and you're the old curmudgeon.
We do it live. Doing the new media show again.
The new media show.
Technology.
Whew. We make it sound so special. So here we are back with the new media show. And Rob, I got you cranked all the way up. So hopefully, and it was just one notch. So hopefully you're just as loud as me. People have been complaining that you're quieter.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because I have a quiet personality, if that's what it is.
Well, you're definitely blowing me out now. Hang on. All right, so I just turned you down in my ears because I don't know.
It was a little loud.
It was just a little bit loud. But yeah, here we are. So you learned something new today about live streaming, didn't you?
I did a little bit trying to work with YouTube on trying to stream this show on my channel.
Yeah.
As well.
So what happens is in StreamYard, you authenticate your account. You can do that with Livewire too. You can authenticate the account. So when you go live, instantly YouTube goes live. I can do that with Restream.io for my account too, because I know my credentials. Now, if I had your username and password to your YouTube account, I could authenticate your account as well. But so what we did is you have to set up a manual stream. And I do that anyway as well, so that the YouTube channel isn't there sitting there running for 60 seconds while we're getting going. And then when everything's ready to go and everything looks kosher, then I can go live and then I don't have to do a post edit in YouTube. So anyway, but yes, we're streaming live. The show is live now as a live show. And it will be available later as a recorded podcast. So
right, there you go. There you go. Now that we got that cleared up, right?
We did get some action last week that I didn't pay attention to. Sadly, with the boosts that came in for the show. We were lit and live as we are today. We're live streaming on a variety of podcast apps right now, audio and video, 2 different channels of content. And people can watch live in those apps, and they can participate in the Value for Value program by sending us boost. And the first boost that we got last week was Matt says, I can't figure out if I prefer telling YouTubers that they don't have a podcast but a show, or say nothing and feel all smug inside. That was 2,112 sats. Bob says, thank Todd. Here a few geek bucks. Take care. That was from Bob. Dave Jones says, keep preaching the gospel. He sent us 25,000 sats.
Wow. Okay.
And then, so we appreciate that, Brian. And Brian says, hey, I appreciate you guys, but I would have loved to hear each of you actually be able to define what you're trying to say and make a point without being interrupted. I have an opinion on this, but I don't feel like I actually heard either one of you actually share how you actually think about these points in a clear way. I think we solved it near the end of the show, at least after about an hour. Brian, so if you weren't there, Todd's basis is we don't care where listeners listen, and let's educate podcasters. That's it.
Well, I think we definitely agreed on the last part of that, is that the podcasters do need to know the difference between doing a podcast and maybe, as the momentum is growing out there of calling every other online content distribution platform a podcast too. So that's really the crux of the question, is whether or not, as a podcasting industry, we're okay with the word being used to describe what's being distributed on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, because they're already calling it that. So they're already telling their audience that it's that. It's just, are we, as an industry, are we willing to accept that in addition to our technical definition of what a podcast is? So
and I say no, and I think Rob says yes.
I think I'm open to it. I'm not sure that I mean, I've been a purist for most of my life, so it's hard for me to kind of change too much on this. But
again, it's about, again, we don't care. The listeners can do what they want to do. I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Yeah, and they can call it what they want.
They can call it what they want. But if we educate the podcasters, then maybe they'll do a good job in educating their audience. So
and as that happens, these proprietary consumption platforms like YouTube and Spotify are, taking hold of that word and applying it to what they're doing. And so that's the pressure that we're seeing. So I hope that clarifies the core of the issue here.
It's really not an issue. It's just a ideology.
Yeah, there's nothing really new about this, because this has been a topic that's been discussed for years. It's just really, I think, when YouTube made that shift to having the ability to convert playlists into what they term as a podcast, has kind of muddied the waters on this discussion.
And just so everybody's clear, I don't care what you do with your own show, but I'm just pretty passionate in the space, and I have strong opinions. So, I'm a podcaster. So,
right. And right or wrong, video is increasingly becoming an important element of podcasting.
To some shows. Right.
But in the minds of new content creators, and many out there, and some of the ones that are advocating out there, it appears that video is coming back somewhat. And that's what we were trying to talk
I think the key here is with that too, is good luck with that.
Yeah, it's not an easy answer.
It's not easy. And if you're just putting a YouTube embed on your website, you're doing a show. If you're the creator. For a listener, they don't care. David says,
you could just make the overall argument, and I've made this argument for years myself, is that, what we are doing here is a show. It's not really a podcast, or it's not a YouTube channel. And it's just a show.
But it is distributed as a podcast, and it is available on a YouTube channel.
Right. Yeah, so that's a descriptive term to describe what has been traditionally defined as the distribution approach.
So I do want to thank David. Days, hey Todd, Rob, thanks for clearing that up. Beauty Bubba says, I'm taking notes on authentication jargon. I must work that out. It's just technical stuff that Rob and I go through here doing, because we're multicasting. We're streaming to about 8 or 9 different locations at the same time.
I mean, Todd, to be honest with you, I don't want to come across as a hypocrite on this. So we're doing all the things.
Yeah.
It's just what we say we are doing.
And we have been doing it for more than 10 years.
Yeah, right.
So this is not new for us for live streaming. So
right. Well, back in the early days of podcasting, I worked on the Zoom platform for Microsoft, and that was a huge video platform with podcasting. So I go way back with this, and that's why I have passion for it, because I think that there is a place for it to come back in a stronger way to help build better connections with audiences, just like what we've done with this show, I think, to some degree.
And Beauty Bible says says as well, maybe it does help to understand the etymologies. And from my research, there are a few that follow the term podcast. Well, again, I think in the end here, what we really want is just an education process. I was talking to someone yesterday, and they said, well, monetization is much easier on YouTube. And I was like, no. I said, today, at least with my company, if you are a brand new podcaster, if you got one listener, you're not going to make any money. You can turn on monetization immediately. You can turn that switch on right now. Right. Yeah. So making money is not difficult. And, and if you, depending on, it doesn't matter where you are creating content, you have to have multiple strategies when it comes to being able to, if monetization is the goal, again, if that's the goal of the show, then, what we're doing here with this new value for value, it's not new, but what we're trying to make people understand is that I can monetize in podcast apps today, in which you have to have 3,000 viewer hours in a rotating month on YouTube before you can even turn that piece on. So anyway, so just know your options out there as content creators. But let's switch to the story of the day. And this is a funny one. I saw this and I scratched my head a little bit. What an absolute fall from grace. Stitcher.
Well, I think it was destined to happen. So we can dive into the details of that. But yeah, go ahead and keep going and just kind of set it up so we can.
How long has Stitcher been out, Rob? I didn't have time to go back into my archives and see when the first appearance of Stitcher was, but
they initially launched their platform officially out of kind of like a beta phase in 2008.
Okay, so they've been around 14 years, 15 years.
Yep.
And at the peak, and I'll have to go back and look at data. At peak, they had captured globally, I want to say four and a half, something like that. Maybe as high as 5, which was, in all circumstances, that was a home run.
Yeah, and a little background around me with Stitcher, I'll be happy to share here. But I had the choice between going to work for Microsoft Zune or going to work for Stitcher back in 2007. So
which should have you picked?
Well, I'm happy I picked going to work for Microsoft. That turned out to be a 7-year career.
Oh, okay.
But I would have been working with Noah, the CEO of Stitcher, if I would have taken that position.
And you might have cashed out.
Well, yeah, but as we've seen over the history of that app, it has struggled over the years, and it has changed hands many times. And there may be a lot of people are just not familiar with what the trajectory of that app has been over the years. That app was actually modeled to some degree, and I talked to Noah about this very early in the days, after the platform I was working on back in 2005 called Mobilecast. So they actually took a lot of the thinking around making audio podcasts available on mobile devices from Mobilecast, which was really kind of pioneering this concept of being a platform that converts audio from MP3 into usable formats that can be used on the early dumb phones, which would be pre-smartphones.
Right.
Back in that time frame, because even back in 2008, a lot of Razor phones and things like that were accessing podcasts, and that was about the same time frame that the iPhone launched. So that was kind of a transition period, but Stitcher had been architected to deliver more than one type of file format, which put them in a position where they had to transcode or re-encode audio files. And they took a lot of heat for that because they were ultimately hosting those media files.
Right.
And that caused a lot of consternation with content creators, as you might imagine.
So, it's went through multiple owners, lots of money has been spent. Now the platform, so just my understanding is from the announcement, it's just the website and the app is going away, but the other creator stuff is staying. So that's kind of Pandora, current owners' gateway, I guess, into, again, it's going to be interesting to see what happens here because people are worried about how they're going to get on Pandora, and just makes you wonder if Pandora's pulling back. But, to achieve a 4.5% global market share was significant.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had a request that came in via text this afternoon, and I didn't have a chance to pull all the data. As a matter of fact, my phone is not sitting here. Forgive me. Who sent it? He's going to shoot me. It came from what's his name? Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So people are like, "Who the hell are you guys talking about?" What's his name? I'm sorry. He's shooting
Jay Soderbergh.
Yes,
right.
Jay. Oh my God. I'm sorry, Jay. I'm having had a senior moment here. Jay had asked, he knew we were going to talk about this. He says, where are, there's all kinds of survey data and where everything stands right now. And we've made some changes at Blueberry here recently, and I don't have access. So I had to do some quick work to get some math. I guess I had to dump stuff into a spreadsheet. I didn't have my nice, pretty GUI. But at Blueberry today, Stitcher was at 0.3%. with about
0.3. Wow.
0.3% with about 2.4 million listens in the month of May.
Wow. That's a big fall.
Big fall. So compared to Apple, specifically Apple Podcasts is at about 58.5%. Spotify for Blueberry is only at like 7%. Web browsers, believe it or not, because you would think this because we have a heavy WordPress usage base, is about 7.5% on people that go to actual website to still listen to podcasts. And we always run 3 to 5% higher than everyone else just because of the makeup of our customers. Google Podcast is about 6.5%, Overcast 4.7%. And you see, Overcast today is carrying essentially the same type of traffic that Stitcher did before.
Right.
And then it's Podcast Addict and Pocket Cast. Podcast Addict with 3.7, Pocket Cast with 2.6. That's the ones I did the quick math on. On the web browser breakup, Chrome gets about 90% of that total traffic, with Firefox and Safari and the rest of them getting the rest of it, at least at Blueberry. So, but for us, Spotify is very, very low compared to like Buzzsprout or someone else.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing to keep in mind as you see these specific platform distribution kind of breakdowns on this, is that it does vary. It's the same thing that I saw at Libsyn. Libsyn has a very high percentage of longtime podcasters on their platform that have been doing podcasts for many, many years. And the distribution of on Spotify is significantly less than Apple, where you look at like a newer platform like a Buzzsprout, and the platform distribution to Spotify is a lot higher percentage. So it depends on the content creators that are in that platform, dictates a lot of that distribution.
And in my site, my personal site, because I have built such a huge web-based traffic to it, my web traffic is massive. My personal show gets about around 27% of its audience listens on the website.
Wow,
it's incredibly high,
right?
And that is way outside the norm. But it's just because of how I built my show and because we're driving people to the site and so forth.
Right. Yeah, because you've got a real aggressive kind of Google SEO strategy, right?
But still, if I look down my personal site, Apple's right up there. Podcast Addict, Overcast, Downcast for iOS, Google, and that's kind of my stack. So my makeup for my show does not fit a typical norm, which I am not on the curve. And I even have a high percentage of Linux users too that come to the website. So that it's a tech show, so what would you expect?
You get all the geeks.
Yeah.
Right.
So but go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to dive into a little bit of the history, a little bit more of the history of Stitcher and kind of what this means beyond. I know that James Cridland did a pretty thorough breakdown of this, and even created a special features page on his platform that was talking about the kind of looking back at the history of the sometimes, as he says, controversial podcast app in a special article. And he links to an article that I wrote back in 2015 about business models in podcasting, and mentioned Stitcher as an example of something that was developing in the industry at the time that I was concerned about, and that's the listening apps trying to monetize without including the content creators in that business model.
Spotify. So
yeah, there's been pressure in that, and it's something that I raised in the article too. Is this reality that these listening apps, if they don't have any other business model strategies attached to them, tend to have a difficult time bringing in revenue unless they're a subscription platform, which some have chosen to go that route too.
Yeah. Now, Rob, this show, iOS is at 56% podcast for iOS. Or Apple Podcasts, excuse me, 56%. Overcast, 13%.
Mm-hmm.
Podcast Addict, 12%. And then it's just a intermix of stuff. We've, example, our browser share for New Media Show is at 2%. So, it goes completely the opposite way.
So Spotify on the list anywhere?
No. Well, let me go look. Let me see how far down it is. Spotify. How far do I have to go? It is literally less than 1%. But again, the top 10 is Apple Podcast, Overcast, Podcast Addict, Downcast for iOS, believe it or not, Castos. And then the next is, Spotify and Stitcher and Alexa and Castbox they're all, I'd have to pull the spreadsheet to get the actual total download numbers, but it's again less than 1%. And there's a lot of apps in there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, let me do it by page. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 some apps are less than 1%.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even break the 1% curve. So, it is what it is. You would think a podcast about podcasting, everyone's going to be using apps. That's exactly what it's what it kind of pawns out here. Operating systems, it's kind of funny.
If you're a podcaster, you're probably...
Yeah, you listen on an app.
Well, if you're in Stitcher right now, likely what's going to happen is you're probably going to be listed in the upcoming update to the Sirius XM app. And then I heard that the web pages for all those podcasts are going to be available through Pandora.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a blended strategy. And I talked to that team back then when when Sirius XM acquired Stitcher. I said, so are you guys going to manage having 3 listening platforms as far as your media company? Because I'm skeptical. Back when that happened, I was like saying, well, are you guys going to roll these up together? Are you going to shut Stitcher down eventually and put all the podcasts into some of the other listening platforms? Because it takes resources, it takes staff, it takes all sorts of things to keep 3 listening platforms that compete against each other going. And so just from an efficiency standpoint in a corporate organization or from a revenue standpoint, you kind of want to focus a little bit, right? And not spread your resources so thin across, especially as you've seen with Stitcher, a declining market share because it just didn't get the investment behind it to keep the market share up.
Yeah.
So, this whole thing was inevitable
Rob,
to happen. Right.
Comments are exploding. People tuned in for round 2 of the cage match. 5150 sats from Dave Jones. I tuned in this week for part 2 of the cage match. 3,303 sats from Mike. YouTube channels are not podcasts. 5150 sats from Dave Jones. He says, here's my basic issue. If suddenly TikTok sucks all of the monetization out of YouTube, well, that's what's happening. All the podcast consultants will start calling TikTok podcasts also. The digital ad sector of podcasting changes the definition of podcasts whenever the money trail leads to some new platform. I remember for a brief moment, Clubhouse was a podcast. So Dave is absolutely right. And another 33 sats again from Mike Dell saying, Mike, YouTube channels are not podcasts. Now we go over to the YouTube forum. It says, Ross says, Facebook is actually the 4th app for listening to podcasts and they don't even have any integration. Again, that's somebody saying some stuff that is blowing smoke.
Well, that's the Signal research that came out this past week. And actually, I'm going to have Paul Rismandel on the show next week to run that down for us.
No, okay. The only time someone watches this podcast on Facebook is when we're live. And everyone's on YouTube today. There is a bunch of people on YouTube. And on Facebook, hardly any. One's watching the live stream today on Facebook. So,
but it's not a podcast on
right. I know
on Facebook, Todd. Right?
It's just a show. Eileen says, "Hey Todd and Rob, what's up, everyone?" Ross again says, "Oh wait." Eileen says, "I remember with Stitcher was the only podcast app to send Android users." Oh, that's true.
Well, and in cars too.
Yeah,
that's the thing that's what their calling card was in the early days. Was that they were the app that had the integration in vehicles.
Eileen says, "I listen on Overcast." Why are you using that old legacy app, Eileen? Go over to podcastapps.com and get yourself a modern podcast app. Darren says, "Podcast Addict user." You're on the right track there. Podcast Addicts adopting Podcast 2.0 stuff. Beauty Bubble says, "Can you access when precisely things started to go wobbly?" For Stitcher? First, it was really that first transaction when they were bought by, what was it, Scripps?
Yeah. Well, it was really, Stitcher was really kind of a tag along to the real property that was valuable, and that was mid-roll.
Yeah.
So that's actually what everybody was buying was mid-roll. It just so happened Stitcher was part of it.
Ross says again, so should new shows still add their podcast to Stitcher? I'd say no. Well, it's kind of the gateway to Pandora.
Well, no.
Or is it?
What they're doing is they have created a submission engine through the Sirius XM platform. So you can go to the Sirius and submit your podcast there. They've been, actually, I talked to the team, this was probably a year and a half ago, that said that they were going to consolidate the submission process. For all new podcasts would go into one submission process, and they would get made available to all three of the listening platforms.
Yes, the number one podcast listening app in the world.
iHeartRadio, right?
Yes. Yep. And then again, global reach less than 1%. So yeah, the number one. Woohoo! Yeah, they're the number one. Yeah, whatever. For their shows.
I thought Spotify was number one now, Todd.
Oh, well, for their shows.
But who at the end of the day has the most consumption and downloads?
Apple.
It's Apple. Right.
Well, everyone says Spotify does because Spotify has a big
No, Spotify has the most listeners or the most users or the most, but they don't have a history of consuming a lot of content.
No one ever from Spotify has ever emailed any of my shows saying, "Listen to your show on Spotify."
I agree, Todd, but oftentimes what they talk about is apples and oranges, right?
And we're not
Spotify never talks about how many episodes are actually watched or listened to on their platform as a comparison to Apple.
Beauty Bubba says, "Watch out, Todd is wagging the finger." So that's coming across Hawaiian. I mean, same people who thought they were listening to podcasts on YouTube last year, now they think they're listening to podcasts on Facebook. So Eileen sounds to be in our court. Ross says, "I call my podcasts the ones that serve through RSS shows, just the same as I call live streams. It's never just a show." Well,
so does this imply, Todd, that when Facebook decided that they weren't going to support podcasting anymore, that was actually a smart move on their part because now they're the number one platform?
I have yet to actually see. I don't see. I live on Facebook. It's a permanent tab that's opened on all my browsers, whether it be my laptop or my iMac or whatever. I subscribe to a lot of podcasters. Matter of fact, probably of my friends that I follow on Facebook, probably a half are active podcasters. I've never seen their podcast in my. I've seen a promotion for their podcast.
Right.
That leads back to an episode somewhere, but I've never. Where is this coming from? Are people thinking Reels now or podcasts? I watch Reels. I don't consider Reels on Facebook to be a podcast. I don't see promotions for podcasts on Reels.
Well, Todd, tune in next week for the next episode of the New Media Show where all that will be clarified.
Oh, well, is it gonna be round 3? Ding, 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 ding.
It'll be round 3, so you don't want to miss it.
Okay.
It's gonna be another cage match between between YouTube and Facebook.
Because guess what? It's no matter what we're going to say, we're all fans of the space, right? We're all fans of podcasting.
Right.
It is the last bastion of free speech because it remains and has always been an open medium that no one can control, and everyone wants to control it. And guess what? And at the same time, give creators nothing. Zero. Thank you very much. Zero. They give you zero. Run ads around your content and give you zero. The creators always get screwed and get zero. Creators have a choice on where their content resides. They have a choice.
Yeah.
Why, we talked about this last year. Just imagine about 50,000 podcasters or 100,000 podcasters said, no, I don't want my content on Spotify. The power in that. The power you have. But most don't understand that. We have, the 10,000, 12,000 people that listen to the show that fully get it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we pound them into submission. So, I don't know, but the Stitcher thing, going back to Stitcher, what a too many different platforms, just too much. They bought too much. And
it's just almost like a drama series. I mean, you could create a whole, movie documentary on the history of Stitcher.
Blueberry has
all of the companies that acquired it and then sold it and then did different things with it. It's a remarkable story.
Blueberry has a directory, and we get a massive amount of traffic to that directory. Literally a million or more hits a month come into the directory itself. People come in and checking shows out, and but it's spread across, again, several million listings. So it's not like each individual listings get a lot. Some shows over there on the directory get a lot. I just think, wow, maybe I can replace Stitcher. Maybe there's an opportunity here, but I don't think so. I'm not building an app, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough to compete in the listening side.
But at the same point, it goes back to, in the end, what do you want for your show? How do you want your show represented? And that's up to each individual podcaster. I keep saying it. Todd can talk to his blue in the face, but you do it. You do you, boo. You do what you want, because in the end, it's your show. That's the beauty. Right. I'm not a gatekeeper. Rob's not a gatekeeper. We just try to caution you about the gatekeepers.
Well, we are surrounded by gatekeepers. So, back in 2020, EW Scripts sold all the podcast assets that it owned, and it basically, Triton Digital went to iHeart, while Stitcher and Midroll were acquired by SiriusXM for $325 million is what the speculated purchase amount was. So what did SiriusXM get out of that deal? They got, I think what they got out of it really was expense of Stitcher and revenue from Midroll.
Right. That's what they got.
Right. And also you can't factor out their content creation studio that they had. I think it was called the Earwolf platform. Is a kind of a comedy talk platform that also has a long history in the podcasting space too. But so they paid quite a bit of money for all that. And this is just another example of how these larger media companies kind of had to acquire their way into podcasting versus build it themselves.
Yeah. So Ross says podcast hosting companies have no restrictions on free speech as long as it's legal in the U.S. I think here's the key with that, Ross. We have terms of service, and if you invoke hate, in other words, and basically hate speech is obviously protected, but at the same time, if you invoke hate and say I'm going to go, off someone, and that's reported to us, you're gone. You're not going to be on Blueberry anymore. There are certain certain things that, and we will cancel account, but. Just because I cancel their hosting doesn't mean that show can't still exist on their own .com. with their own RSS feed and host their own media. So, that's the delta there. That's, from my perspective. There is a lot of companies that are blowing up my inbox. Matter of fact, I had one this morning. Someone on LinkedIn says, "Hey, we see all your content on your website. We want to come in and tell you, we want to run through all that and tell you which one of those episodes are not brand safe." And I said, "No, thank you. I'm not interested. I'm not busting my Section 230 protection by becoming someone that is going to scrutinize the content. If someone reports something, we obviously investigate, and we have a DMCA takedown process for that. But I'm not going to go and be the speech police."
Well, it's the path towards content moderation coming into podcasting, and I think we have to be aware of that's kind of what's happening there.
Well, and again, like I said last week, we need to start a list of companies that are being known to use content moderation and have that list be publicly known, so podcasters again know who's doing moderation on content. I don't think hosts are doing that. I think it's.
I don't believe that any hosts are
I don't think so.
But I do think that certain platforms.
Yeah, I think adding DAI probably.
Those are doing it on some shows, and those shows may not even be aware of it.
Yeah, I believe that too. Well, they should know.
Well, they should, and that's the key takeaway there, is that they should know that they're being analyzed, and that data that's coming out of that analysis is being used to decide on scope of campaigns.
Yeah. Eileen says, "I'm going to pick YouTube over Facebook." Eileen, I'm picking my website over all of them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Because when YouTube doesn't like what I say and take my stuff off, it's still available on my website, and I don't have a YouTube embed on my website, so I don't have to worry about that disappearing either. So
I do wonder, one aspect of Stitcher that was well known back in its heyday was its work in getting integrated into cars. Right. I just wonder what's going to happen to that part of it, because I saw that early as a big value prop for Stitcher, was getting integration into the cars. And I think what's happening now is we're seeing the Android platform and Apple's platform, CarPlay and things like that, get integrated into vehicles more now. So those big platforms are really being the funnel for what Stitcher was trying to do early on. And so there may not be a place for Stitcher anymore in the car.
I had to go run an errand this afternoon, and on the way into the office this morning, which my commute's only 10 minutes, I'm using Fountain, the app, and it works on Apple CarPlay. So basically, I'm listening to Fountain, and I'm able to control it on the dashboard. I don't even use the Apple Podcast app in my car. I use my third party app, or my modern podcast app, and
through your phone,
through my phone. So it's through my phone. I don't ever use any of the. It's all through your phone for Apple CarPlay. And the same thing, I've got an Android device too, and sometimes it syncs it instead, and it goes to the Android Play, and it's the same deal. So I think most of us that are in vehicles doing any type of commute, I have to look at that sometime and see if we can see how much listening is actually happening on Apple CarPlay. But again, I think it's through the Apple Podcast app, so maybe it doesn't even show up as CarPlay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But again, I use Fountain, so through Fountain.
Right. And if you look back in the history of Stitcher, their original name was Stitcher Radio.
Right.
Many people don't know that or remember that, but the whole concept of Stitcher when it was formed was basically creating more of a lean back experience, more of like a playlist type of a listening experience. And what they faced criticism for was basically inserting audio ads in between episodes of a playlist of podcasts. So let's say you subscribe to 5 different podcasts, and they would basically auto assemble those episodes into a playlist that would automatically be updated. and you just click play and it would play your playlist, and then they would automatically insert ads in between the episodes. And there was no revenue share in the early days of that with content creators. And since the content was being rehosted, encoded, re-encoded, and then they were running ads against around the content, not in the content, but around the content, they felt like they could monetize this app. And that's where they faced a lot of friction. And that's where the article that I wrote really was addressing that methodology and how a lot of these listening apps were struggling to justify the investment in the existence of the app.
Well, you look
pay developers and things like that because there was no revenue model.
Were you working at Podcast One at that time when you wrote that?
Yes.
Okay, so I know.
No, I was working for Spreaker.
So I know the late Norm Pattis.
I used to work for Norm.
I know, but the late Norm Pattis had a huge issue with Stitcher.
Yeah, he did,
and he didn't want content.
Actually, Norm wanted to buy Stitcher. Actually, I don't know if that's ever been said publicly, but
I guess you're not under NDA anymore.
No, I'm not. He's left Earth, so.
Well, some entity of the company is still there, so anyway. But I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So he was a big no, and he's also was big on not going to Spotify when Spotify was not doing pass through. Well, when they were doing caching.
Yeah, it was the whole rehosting was the issue, and many of the larger media companies objected to that back in those days. So you can't really beat up on it too much because that was a lot of the revenue models, and we're seeing some pressure around that coming back again. There's always an interest. We've heard this with YouTube and things like that, and Spotify, like you said, they started out caching too. So right.
Yeah, I wish I could talk about a certain topic, but I can't.
You can't?
I can't. I think this caching issue, and that's part of the problem with the YouTube piece is they're caching the media too. So,
well, they've been doing that for years.
I know, but I just
it's not a new thing.
But I'm talking about YouTube is caching yeah, of course, but I think that's going to be a big detriment to wide adoption by people submitting RSS feeds over there when they get that done. I just don't. I think the big shows are going to be very, very hesitant to do so unless of course big shows are probably going to get some deal. And then again, the small shows are just, tough luck, Charlie. You send me a ad-free version of your show and suck it up and we will monetize on top of you and give you nothing. So
I think where they're going to want is episodes that don't have dynamically inserted content. I think is what.
But Rob, it's I can dynamically insert a host endorse just as easy as I can dynamically Geico ad.
Sure.
So it's one half dozen.
Yeah, but even if you look at YouTube more broadly, they're okay with host read ads.
Yeah, of course, but you have to.
But the problem is there's no replacing it.
Right. And that's why businesses like doing collaborations because that collaboration's always in there. That's why you see, AG1 or whatever that Athletic Greens. It's about I see that green stuff, and I'll probably never. Obviously, I'm going to say this, and I'll never get Athletic Greens ad. That stuff. Have you ever tasted it?
No, I haven't.
I don't know.
But I also,
to me, it's. Sure, it's healthy for you. If it doesn't,
they're never going to advertise on this show
for sure. But I see a lot. It tastes good. It's wonderful. It's healthy for you. Yeah, okay.
So it's going to get flagged in the content moderation. So I don't know if that's a category in the content moderation algorithm.
Oh, I'm sure.
Disdain.
But it's on YouTube. It's the same advertisers all over the place. People, shilling for, the same companies again and again. They must be having good success with it.
Yeah.
So
well, it probably works for some
that
people.
and VPNs. Right. Every VPN on the planet is advertising on YouTube. So
people will take the revenue, right?
You got absolutely right. Hey, that reminds me. I did listen to it. I'm not going to say the show because it's going to get a reaction. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I very rarely listen to the top podcast.
Right.
And I grabbed one that, let's say, is in the top 25. Just because I hadn't heard it before. I wanted to listen to the format. I could only stand it for about 30 minutes. And here's the reason why. 2 pre-rolls. And every 4.5 to 5 minutes, 2 ads. And I listened, I think, to 7 total ads, which I started hitting the 30-second advance button on because the transitions were horrible. There was at least 7 ads in the first 30 minutes of content making up, and I started counting it. I didn't want, because some of them were 30-second reads, some of them were 1-minute reads, and host reads, kinda, and I was like 15 minutes of content and maybe 10 minutes of ads. I'll never listen to that show ever again. I'll never ever listen. So I was blown away at the ad load in this particular show. There's got to be people that how this show stays in the top 25 is beyond me. Who would listen with that many ad insertions?
So Todd, how many ads in an hour audio program do you think is acceptable? 30-second ads, let's say.
3?
3 in the whole episode? Yeah. Pre-roll, post-roll?
3 mids. I don't. 3. No one listens. You can have it. I would say 3 mids would be. Well, I'm just telling you what my show does. If I do an hour and if I do 2, I'm good. 3 is pushing it. But I couldn't. I got so pissed off. I was like, I'm not listening to this ever again.
So, are you doing a blend of programmatic as well as host reads in your show? Is that what you're?
I do one pre and 1 mid for my personal show.
Okay. Programmatic
for the pre and then GoDaddy for the host read.
Okay.
And it's a host read. It's not. It lives. It's going to be in the media forever.
And don't you usually do like a minute and a half on that or something like that?
Yeah,
too?
I do a minute and a half.
Read.
Yeah.
Right.
But sometimes I do short, sometimes I do a little longer. Depends. I try to get in and out in about a minute. But it was and it was all stuff that I would, how should I say it? Okay, yeah, exactly. VPNs, some food program, AG1, it's all the thing. And I just like, really? And there's no emotion by the host. It's just this kind of read the script. Now here, you should try this because this, and use this as such and code / such and such, this and that, and make sure you get a 90-day trial instead of a 30-day trial by using such and such code, such and such. And I just like, there was so many that I was like, shoot me in the head because it interrupted the content. And I was like, what was the individual talking about before the ads start? Because it got because again, every 3.5, 4.5, 5 minutes, bam, another ad.
Todd, do you remember the early episodes of Kevin Smith's Smodcast network? Did you ever listen to any of that?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, he probably had like 7-8 minutes of promos and ads at the beginning of every episode that he did.
God bless him. He got paid because I'd have been going hit 30 second. I'd have bit that thing about 10 times.
Well, that's what he would get on the show and say at the end of that 8-minute run. He'd say, I know I've got a lot of promos at the beginning of the show. If you just don't want to listen to them, just hit the fast forward button.
Oh my God. He said that, huh?
Yeah, he actually would say that right at the beginning of a show. So the next time somebody would listen to a show, they would skip through all the ads.
And you'd get paid for all of them. Probably performance that was junk.
Right. So he was playing a game with the audience, right? So he was telling the advertisers, I'm going to have you at the very beginning of the show, telling all these promos and promo swaps and these comedy shows and all this stuff that he was promoting at the beginning of the show. And then he tells the audience to just next episode.
So as a podcaster, because we're talking to podcasters,
right.
Go, and I don't know how many top shows you listen to. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how many you listen to. I rarely listen to any of them. I'm down in the weeds. I'm down in the 200, 300 level area, and go and just grab yourself 5 top shows, grab a couple political ones, and then listen. I know maybe you won't be able to stomach it, but listen to how many ads. And I think you're going to agree with me. It's too much. I just don't understand. I don't understand how loyal. I would not be loyal.
And Todd, the second question is, where are those podcasts hosted? That's the second question on that. Are they a platform that's associated with a radio network by chance, or that'll give you a good clue?
No, actually not. This one wasn't.
No, this one wasn't, huh?
But if I said the name, first of all, I was just checking show out because I wanted to hear, I heard about this podcaster, how great the show was. And I know someone said earlier they don't like listening to us at 1 speed because it sounds too slow. Well,
I'll have to speak faster and then you won't be able to do that.
Yeah. So. Come on now. Don't listen at 1.5. You miss the nuances of the show, those dramatic pauses.
Yeah.
And here's another thing I found out, that if you listen at 1.5, there's something psychologically negative that happens to you. I
would think your comprehension drops.
Well, there's other things that happen. So I'm just cautioning you. Go back to 1.0 on all the shows you listen to. Do it for a week. Do it for 7 days or 10. Tell me if your anxiety goes down.
Oh. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
I don't think it's healthy to listen at 1.5 speed or 2. Really don't. I don't think it's healthy at all.
Well, it's not a normal way that people speak. That's the thing. Your brain has been developed to listen to speech in a certain way. That's unnatural.
So that's just my opinion. And I just try it for 10 days and see how you do. You're going to be anxious. It's going to be painful. Those first few episodes you listen at 1.0.
Right.
But I've heard other people talk about this issue that they've had, and where they've switched off of going from 1.5 to 1.
So Todd, do you want to talk about a couple other things that popped up in the space?
Yeah.
There's a new CEO at Libsyn. On John Gibbons.
So why are they switching hats so often over there?
Well, I can only speculate on this, but John was hired probably about a year and a half ago as the president and chief product officer for Libsyn. He's a terrific guy. He's the former CEO of Pocket Casts, so he's got a long history. He's been CEO of or CIO or whatever of a variety of companies in the past. So he's a very experienced CEO and tech leader.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not entirely surprising to some degree that he would be picked for that potential role. I'm assuming that Brad, the former CEO, chose to move on and maybe take on some new projects. It's not unusual for
did
investors
Brad
like
stay
that.
with the company, or is he doing something else?
Who's this? Did Brad stay with? I would imagine he's staying on the board probably.
Oh, okay. I met Brad too. Brad's a nice guy.
I don't know. Right.
Oh, you've never met Brad, or?
Who, me?
Yeah. You knew Brad.
No, I've worked a lot with Brad over the years.
Yeah.
Over the time that.
So the new guy, the new CEO,
Right.
You had
I've worked with John too.
with John a lot.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I think he'll be
I don't know
good.
if I've met John. Maybe.
It's possible.
I'm horrible with names. I need someone to follow me around and tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, that's so and so." You know, I'd go to parties. You know, I need a name. I need a name tag on you. You know, because sometimes people come to me and say, "Hey, Todd," and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing? How you been?" And, you know, I'm kind of looking at their conference badge, trying to figure out who they are. So
I think that Libsyn is in good hands with John. So I think it'll work out okay. And then maybe Brad can move on and work on a different project. I know Brad owns a lot of stock in Libsyn. I mean, he kind of came into this role as an activist investor of sorts, is what I would say. I mean, he bought in a significant share of the company.
There's nothing he can do with that stock.
Not currently, but I'm sure that they have a plan to bring it back into the public market at some point. You know, who knows when, but that is likely the outcome. But this probably isn't the best time to be taking a company back out into the public market. So it may be good to just hold for a little while until the economy turns around.
Eileen says they use Libsyn as a resume builder.
Right.
Well, you know, that's okay too.
Yeah. Well, I got some benefit over the years from formerly working at Microsoft, so I can definitely see that.
It's always good to have a rich CV. My CV is pretty thin.
Well, it's because you only worked at one company over the years, right?
Well, I worked for the government and then built my own thing.
Right. And then, you know, I think now as you look at it, I mean, I think a lot of people that build their own companies now are highly respected people. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I'm just.
Did you also see? Yeah. Did you also see the quotes from Matt Cutler, the former kind of head of content over at Spotify? He's the former head of Pearcast, and I guess he did an interview talking about Spotify, and he suggested in this interview that it's a mistake. It's a mistake on the part of Spotify to go after Hollywood talent.
You know, the Rob and Todd consulting firm could have saved Spotify $800 million.
Well, because I experienced this myself.
I know.
For Podcast One.
That's what I'm saying. We could have. You know, I told the Spotify team when they bought Anchor, I said, you know, I could have saved you, $100 million just for a little, 1 hour consult. You know, they obviously think they know best. Can't monetize the network.
Yeah, and he also said that he also discussed the slowness of decisions at the company, and shows that are resourceful rather than entertaining are what's next. I think that was a very interesting quote that I don't know if we want to try and dissect, but when he says
resourceful,
looking forward, shows that are resourceful rather than entertaining.
Shows that give information, have, educate. We have enough entertainment already. I don't need, and there's a certain, I don't watch. Do you watch? Do you listen to entertainment shows?
No.
I mean, neither, right?
That's because they're low value, low mentally challenging.
Even if Harry and Meghan had created a podcast, I'd have never listened to it because I don't care.
Well, it's all gossip and
activist stuff. I don't.
Yeah.
I have no.
Right.
I don't care.
Yeah. Well, and lots of people just don't care about the whole, English.
Well, some people love and follow celebrities. I understand it.
Right.
I understand why people create podcasts after television series. It's not necessarily the actors, it's the series. You look at Yellowstone. I love Yellowstone. I'm sad Yellowstone's going away. It's one of the favorite series after Lost that I've watched every episode.
Right.
I'm not a country boy. I don't rope cattle. But it's kind of this cool thing, right? This cool show. A lot of drama, big bullies and that kind of stuff. They're beating up people and, gunfights. Hey, modern stuff, that's fun. But that's entertainment but I would never create a podcast about it. Some people do, and I'm sure those podcasts have been very successful. But I don't want to listen to Carly B, and I don't want to listen to, I have no desire. I want to be educated.
So I think it's interesting that Spotify has chosen to kind of pull back a little bit on the celebrity podcast because they are expensive. They don't always work. And they've had a lot of failed deals that have come through. So it's not surprising that maybe they're going to follow Matt's advice.
Rob, here's what it is. They're under major, major scrutiny. The free money is gone.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have success. They have to have shows that deliver major numbers. Because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I tell you already what's going to happen. Here's the crystal ball. And if it isn't happening already, every podcast on that platform is going to get a pre-roll played against it.
Right.
Spotify is going to run ads against podcasters' content, and then podcasters are going to cry, how come I'm not getting no money? Well, they have to put dollars in the bank. And the only way they can do it is through subs, people that pay for their Spotify subscription, and the ads that come into the system. Those are and maybe they're going to, whatever else they're branching off to, movies, books, whatever. They're going to have some small numbers on their revenue line. It's a little blip. There's this much, 1.5% of revenue based upon whatever. And at the same time, they've got a history of not taking care of artists anyway, in my opinion. So they have to figure out a strategy that's going to, recoup some of this $1 billion that they've lost.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Beauty Bubble says, let's do it. That consulting firm sounds good to me. But there's a whole bunch of people that are in the podcasting space that would be great consultants. That could, because they've been in this space a long time. They say, that might not work. It's been tried 3 times.
The space keeps evolving and changing, and what people are interested in shows and how to go to market with them is constantly changing too. Yeah. And that's why a lot of consultants don't always know what they're talking about because, they're not keeping up with the market.
My deck team did there was actually an explanation mark in the chat channel about a week ago. They actually got a consultant on the phone that knew what he was talking about. And I said, get that individual's name. Make sure we know who that person is. So when someone needs a consultant, we can refer them to them because they actually knew. They didn't have to be educated.
Right. So Todd, did you see the news that Australia leads the world when it comes to podcast listening? Do you know that?
Well, that would be cool.
It says, according to Edison Research, it says
what's the percentage?
The Australian study showed that 43% of Australians listen to a podcast every month.
So,
don't eat me, James Cridland.
Why is that?
Compared to 42%. So it's not ahead by much.
No, but still, what do they say what's driving that?
I don't know. I think it's probably just a culture difference. I don't think that commercial radio is as big there, but
commercial radio has driven most of their conferences, right?
Right. It says 43% of Australians listen to a podcast every month compared to the US 42, a third every week compared to, I'm not following.
I'm a pretty big social bunny. I'm out and about and talking with people, and I talk about, they ask me what I do, and I explain what I do, and of course, I say I work in the podcasting space, and they say, "Oh, what's your podcast about?" And so I have to explain, I do a podcast, but I also run a hosting company, and they don't understand that, but they understand podcasts. I haven't run into anyone that doesn't listen to podcasts in a very, very long time, on all age levels. Yeah. So for me, I think the penetration in the United States is much, much higher than. Again, I've got the full exposure on age ranges, my age group all the way down. So I don't know. Yeah. When's the last time you had someone tell you, Rob, that they didn't listen to a podcast when you met them?
I don't know. I can't.
I always ask what show they listen to.
I can't think of anybody right now that has said that, but the study also asked what platform they use to listen to podcasts too, and the Edison research out of Australia is coming up. Spotify is number one with 34%. Now it says used more often. It's not talking about downloads. It's not talking about any other metric than how many times they used it. The number one is Spotify at 34%. YouTube is number two at 24%. And Apple Podcasts is 3 at 11%. It says Apple Podcasts isn't on Android. And the research says Android has 51.6% share of mobile devices in Australia.
Well, I'm going to be honest. If once you leave the confines of Canada, the United States, and probably UK, the number of people carrying iPhones diminished greatly. In Japan, again, we have to look country by country on makeup of devices, but Spotify, for sure, based upon just that trip out to Riyadh, is very obvious to me that, Spotify has a scorched earth policy in those countries. I have no doubt that they're doing well outside in those other markets. I have no doubt whatsoever.
Yeah. So if you look at this just on the surface, if 51.6% of the devices are Android, that does mean that there's like 8% that are iOS, right? So it's a pretty big percentage.
Sure.
That are still on the Apple platform. But what the difference is probably with Spotify is that Spotify's on the Apple and Android platforms versus Apple only available on the Apple platform. Right. Which is another example of why Apple, it would make sense for them to put out an Android app.
But it's also, Rob, if going back to what we've done at Blueberry for many, many years, we've talked about it 100 times on the show. When we adopted that subscribeonandroid.com and integrated with a lot of third-party podcast apps, including a new one just recently, we had our content creators trained to get people onto Android. So we've always led in Android adoption, and then that's probably narrowing a little bit now, but it's just because we made it easy for Android users to get subscribed to shows. So, and Stitcher's made it easy. I mean, not Stitcher. Spotify's made it easy to listen to shows on outside on Android. So yeah, it's no doubt it's Google's fault, for their poor implementation. Everything they've done with podcasts on Android so far. This is the thing I keep going back to. Google has a horrible track record when it comes to podcasts. Horrible. And I'm not convinced this YouTube strategy is going to work. They get the benefit of the doubt because they're YouTube. But no one's talking about YouTube music.
Well, if this means that YouTube gets more video content, then they're happy, right?
Yeah, I'd love to see the deltas between those that are doing video on YouTube and those that are doing audio on YouTube, and how many people are doing audio on YouTube. Are they happy with their numbers? Just doing audio only. Is it being discovered? By the way, I do have to ask you, what did you think of our album art from last week? Did you see it?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. You didn't look at our album art.
On not the series art, but on the website?
Did you see the episode art from last week?
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, Rob. Look, got to load newmediashow.com. That was created with Midjourney. And it's basically two dudes yelling into microphones. And we got some compliments. I had people talking on different shows about that.
Wow. I think we found our new show cover art.
Well, that's for one episode. I'm going to create something today different based upon everything we've talked about. It'll probably be something to do with stitching or something like that, unzipping a zipper or something, because we've talked a lot about stitching.
Okay. Right.
So, maybe a zipper with the Infernal of Hell behind it or something like that.
So what kind of a query did you put into this app to generate this?
I basically said 2 men yelling into microphones, facing off each other like they were going to do battle. Basically, that was kind of the query.
Kind of a little bit like a wrestling match, right? That's the analogy
I had 2 or 3 things that I tried beforehand and it was horrible.
Arm wrestling is what it should have been.
But I think this thing knocked it out of the ballpark. I was like, that was it was great. Now, have you seen what I did to the YouTube channel? Oh, so you're slipping. Let me.
No, I didn't know that you posted all this stuff.
Well,
so
I
didn't go look.
Let me show you what I did for the channel. So this is the album art on one side is basically shows a picture of a audio studio, and the extra one is a video studio. But if you see the big image of it, on top it says New Media Productions, and on the bottom it says Geek News Central on one half and New Media Show on the other half. So you can't see the full version of this. I don't know how you actually. I don't think you can actually see the. I just loaded it. But if you go and look at this on YouTube TV, you can see the full scope of the art. But this is just playing around with Midjourney, having a little fun with it and see what I could come up with. So
it kind of looks like Leo Laporte's studio.
But it's just kind of a cool little render thing, and it's it is what it's and I don't know how to show more links. I've actually got GNC and NMC, both of them linked. But anyway, it's just playing around with this thing, and
that's cool.
I think Midjourney is going to be my best $20 I've spent this year. It's better than ChatGPT, and we're not going to go down that road. But I've been having a lot of fun with Midjourney.
Yeah, looks like it.
And when someone talks about our album art on another show, you've done well. And with Apple getting ready to support episode level album art in iOS 17.
That's true. That's coming out, in September?
Yeah, I don't know when. But, when it comes out, the episode level, finally, they're going to support their own tag.
Right.
So there's one thing. Have you heard about this new experiment they're doing in Podcasting 2.0 called Value Time Split? Okay.
No, I haven't, I guess.
All right. So a best way to describe it is, and again, these guys are like, they call it running with scissors. They're truly running with scissors, running down a hallway with the scissors pointed at them, actually, and hope they don't trip and impale themselves. Sometimes they do. But this value time split basically allows you, let's say we are going to bring on a guest for a little bit, and we could actually change our value block for a short period of time to our guest. The analogy, the test cases they're using is they're playing indie music during the podcast. So they're doing their commentary and they break for a music clip, a 2.5, 3 minute indie clip. And the money that's earned from the value block goes to the show versus to the host during the time the music is playing. And then it switches back, and then the value block for basically when people are using a modern podcast app, when they're streaming sats by the minute, if they're doing 100 sats per minute per se, that artist would probably get like 300 sats for that listen, and then it would go back to the artist. They've had some huge success just doing some experiments. So this thing is just that is way out there, on like fringe utilization. But I think you could see DJs starting to do things where they're doing music sets and streaming live from a value standpoint, audio, and basically having these artists earn money through a value time split. The use cases in podcasting are starting to expand because, music obviously is very, very challenging because you have to make sure you're not violating copyright and that you're actually using indie music and not, someone's cover that's on, some record label. But, just some of the stuff that's going on here. Remember blog rolls?
Yeah.
Well, now you can do a pod roll. And you basically can, within your RSS feed, and it's not implemented with us yet, but others are starting to implement it. You can basically send a link and say, here's 10 shows I recommend that I listen to. And basically do like you did in the old days when we had a blog roll, pod roll. Those would show up in the podcast app, said, okay, Todd recommends these 7 shows that you should listen to in conjunction with his own show. So we have the ability to drive a recommendation engine personally, that's personally curated and not machine curated. I can tell my audience, okay, I think these 5 will be good for you to listen to. So there's some cool stuff that's coming. We just need more adoption, and you need podcasters just to pay attention to what's going on here. We're the expansion of features is beyond anything. The news shouldn't be YouTube. The news should be all this cool new stuff that we're bringing to the marketplace for podcasters, for listeners. And
it's just a matter of getting all the apps to embrace them all.
Yeah, and that number's growing every day. I think there's 7 or 8 now, but still, getting the audience to understand, what we're doing here is important. Not just from the value stuff, not for V4V, but all the other new features we're bringing that are going to make the experience for a listener much more engaging on the podcast app they use. Rob, your video went away.
Yeah,
you're showing.
I pulled up a screenshot.
So what is that?
It's actually from the Podcast Business Journal about active podcast trend line.
Yep.
So this is a chart that I'm showing that shows starting May 29th, 2023. So not that long ago.
Yep.
About a month ago or so. That's the trajectory of the number of podcasts updated in the last 90 days.
I could probably pull a corresponding chart to show you the increase in listeners that are basically, because of this declining number of shows, I can show you an equal chart going the other way of podcasts from the listener side, where apps or shows are climbing in listenership. In some shows,
as there's fewer shows, there's probably more listeners available.
The audience has not gone anywhere. So the audience of these fewer shows, the audiences are migrating to shows that are still active. So I've seen, incredible. I'm looking at shows, I'm like, whoa, where did they get an 18% jump? And it's just all these.
Yeah, I would share that. I would share that number too, because that's a confirmation of the concept that maybe this is a terrific time to start a new show.
That best time ever.
Right.
No, I'm not kidding. It's if you're an active podcaster, this is not the time to throttle back. This is roll up promotion, double down on social, get out there where these audiences are hanging out. It's time. You've got the sun is shining, and it is bright and high noon for shows that are new, are basically are creating content. It's a great time to grow audience. My personal tech shows, I think we're up 15% this year. It's big. I've never seen growth like this in a this short of a period of time.
Yeah.
Because people are still listening. It'll be interesting to see what the Edison research stuff comes out with share of ear and all that as we go forward to see what has happened. But I also think that a lot of listeners are, you look at subs on Netflix and subs on these other platforms are going down. So what they're really seeking out, I think the consumption habits of consumers are changing now too. I think there's a dual element here.
Right.
And if you're providing compelling, good content, wherever it may be, I think you're going to do well in growth. Especially,
and I think you're seeing a lot of the big competition, right? These larger media companies really pull back. I don't know if you saw
the free money's gone. They can't. They have to have success. They can't have a loss.
Even a historically successful network, New York Public Radio, has initiated layoffs and
No
cutbacks
bonuses. Yeah.
So you're seeing, platform or content platforms that are historically done very well to capture attention in the podcasting space really kind of pull back.
Everyone continues to say, "Oh, advertising is great," but there's someone's fibbing.
Well, I think that let's say it from what I'm seeing too, is that there's less trust in content coming out of mainstream media of all types right now. And there's a shift over to, maybe giving the little guy a chance.
Maybe. It's never rolled down to the little guy. But our programmatic is doing well. So
I think that, podcasting, like you keep saying, is one of the last bastions of free speech to some degree. And that can either be a good thing or it can be weaponized against us. I think the world is kind of like trying to control conversation.
You know where it's all going. It's all going to TikTok. Yeah, all the money's going to TikTok. TikTok has got, that's why TikTok, has been under so much scrutiny, is because they're taking money away from all these other platforms.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see the actual dollar amounts is shifting from one medium to the next.
Yeah. Did you watch it all? Any of the sessions out of VidCon out of Los Angeles?
No, I don't. Rob, I have a day job. I work. I don't have time.
Yeah, but you say you consume a lot of content.
No,
still.
I do, but when I go home from the end of the day, I watch sailing shows. I don't watch I don't watch podcasts or industry stuff. I need to decompress. I do this for 10 hours a day. I don't need to do it anymore.
Right.
Or I won't last. I'll be dead in 3 years.
I thought that the discussion at VidCon was very much aligned with the kind of current state of podcasting right now, is that they're seeing this change in behavior in consumption and content creators. It's shifting more towards independent creators.
So are they saying consumption is shifting towards independent creators?
Yep. And the whole event was very focused on talking about monetization strategies for individual creators. And at the same time, YouTube announced a reduction in the kind of requirements for being qualified for monetization. They dropped the requirement from 1,000 subscribers to 500 subscribers,
and 4,000 to 3,000 listening
on the listening hours. Right.
So why
are they doing that?
Yeah.
It's so they can attract more independent creators to their platform.
Well, because people are saying, "Screw you! I'm going to," because you can monetize on TikTok at 1,000.
Well, they're seeing a lot of uptake in independent voices creating programs on the platform, and people shying away and not trusting content coming from the major media companies that have been historically publishing or redistributing their content on YouTube under licensing agreements with YouTube. People are just not watching that stuff as much. They're watching more niche targeted topic programs.
I probably I don't watch any news. Zero.
Right. That's part of what the trend is starting to show. Is I don't either. I don't watch any mainstream news media anymore.
I might tune in if there's some national event going on. I might load something up, like that sub. I checked out a little whatever was on the 30-minute repeat. I might check something like that out.
Yeah.
Or read an article. Maybe go to a major news site and read. But I do not trust the New York Times. There's a whole bunch of media places I don't trust.
Right.
And I look at all this stuff with a skeptical eye. So I think podcasters are unique in that, and maybe even some YouTubers are unique in that you are the voice or face of your show, and your credibility is really based upon the data you put forth. But one person's truth is another person's, that's propaganda. So because of this, this political rift that we have.
Yeah, right. Trust and truth kind of right along together. And that's kind of why I'm doing the show I'm doing now called Trust Factor.
Right.
Now I'm starting to roll it into looking at specific instances of things that are happening in the world that are either creating trust or distrust. And those are, kind of interesting comparisons around where those sources are coming from and who do we believe, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what all of us have to decide is what information do we want to believe and what other information rides along with it that either confirms or denies that ability to believe it.
It's just, it's just like when I go to tech sites, I have to be really careful because there's a lot of agendas from tech content. Sometimes, do you know if that article's been a pay to play? Right. Is it, they don't say it is, but you read through it and you're kind of like, this sounds kind of like an advertisement. Product reviews, there's.
Right, it's critical thinking. I mean, that's what we're kind of, some people are pushing away from questioning things, right?
Yeah.
It's just taking what we're being told and that's what you have to believe. And if you speak out against something, then it's weaponized against you. That's not the kind of world I want to live in.
Yeah. Well, we have made it here without killing each other.
We should have these icons that are like boxing gloves, Todd.
Well, go over there and sign up for Midjourney and play around with it and have fun with it. It doesn't do text well. That's the bad thing. It'll create an image, but I tried to get it to create some stuff the other day that was, I just wanted a picture of a Matrix box, Matrix
right.
theme with the GNC written inside of the box. It wouldn't do it. So you basically have to, if you want text on any image it creates, you have to do your own because it gave me a G one time, but it doesn't do text good. So
wonder why it's shying away from text. That's very easy to generate.
I just don't know if I'm saying the terms right. Maybe I'm invoking the instructions wrong.
Or is it a font licensing issue?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what it is? But it doesn't do text well, so you have to drop it into some editor and then put your text in. So anyway.
So it needs to know all of the existing fonts out there and to know that it can't replicate any of those. It's got to come up with its own.
Probably. And I don't know if any fonts are actually in the public domain or not, but
it's a good question. Well, AI needs to create some.
Well, that's potential too. So So anyway, was this a much nicer show today, everyone?
Yeah, we didn't come to blows at all. We didn't scream in the microphone.
It wasn't a cage match. Round number 2 really didn't progress. So
it just didn't pan out, did it?
Those of you hung out here long enough. Rob and I have been doing this about 10 years. We know each other pretty well. So, we can agree to disagree and have a good conversation. And I can be a little passionate too. So, but that's why we do this. We do this so you form your own opinion.
Right. Well, somebody has to play a foil against you sometimes, Todd. That just kind of.
Oh, that's okay.
Comes with the territory. Makes for a more interesting show.
So, by the way, are you wearing a?
No.
I see that shirt you're wearing. I know who. How many of those you got in your drawer? 25 or 30?
I've got a few of them. Yes.
You seen you have a Tesla. You don't change oil very often. If you want to, I need some good oil change T-shirts. So I'll be happy to get 2 or 3 of those, or wear it backwards and make sure no one can see the advertising, and get a bunch of oil on it and then throw it in the trash can.
Right. So. There you go. Got a couple from a few other companies.
Yeah, I'm sure people do that with ours as well, but I'm just joking here. But
I don't actually have any blueberry shirts. You should send me one.
No, you come to Podcast Movement, we probably will have some there.
I'm not currently set to come to Podcast Movement right now. So.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
interesting.
We'll see.
Huh.
As far as I know, we're not doing this show live at Podcast Movement this year.
Yeah.
So
we're too outspoken. Who knows?
Are we? Well, I try not to be too outspoken, but on certain topics, but other ones I do shy away from.
Well, our YouTube numbers are dropping. People know we're going to quit. Todd at who cares, right? Todd at blueberry.com, Todd at blueberry.com, at Geek News on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter as well at Rob Greenlee. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, go through the normal list. And you can send me an email too if you want, rob.greenlee@gmail.com. I'm happy to hear from you. I'd love to hear any tips that you might have about things that are going on in the industry. I'm always trying to keep up with that. And hopefully I'll make it to podcast movement. So we'll see.
Newmediashow.com. Follow or subscribe to the podcast. You'll see that link's on the website. By the way, Rob, don't forget, you have to hit end stream on YouTube. So you have to load that tab up and remember to hit end stream so that when we're done, because otherwise they'll sit there and try to figure out what's going on. That's the difference when you run a manual start stop on YouTube versus when you're just authenticated with StreamYard and it just stops automatically. So just know you have to go back to that tab and hit end stream when you're finished. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. We will be back on July 5th. I hope everyone has for those of you in the United States, have a great 4th of July.
Paul Rismandel is going to join us from Signal.
Yep.
To talk about the recent research they put out talking about the top ranked podcast consumption apps and platforms.
We gave the Blueberry team Monday off, so they're getting a good long extended 4-day weekend. So as I tell people, be safe because this weekend there'll be some amateurs out there, and be careful when you're driving because people will be partying up because of the 4th of July, and don't blow your barbecue grills up. And for those of you outside the United States, have a great Monday, Tuesday at work. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the New Media Show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.